Hey folks, I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but I'm the stereotypical white conservative American man. I've spent a lifetime in corporate America, and I've spent years as a minister in a white evangelical church. I run a beef cattle operation, perhaps you'll hear them mooing here shortly. I drive a diesel truck. My favorite drink is beer. Cold beer. Not fruity beer, just beer. However, my life as a stereotypical white conservative American man took sort of a unexpected turn when I became the adoptive father of 4 black kids. So I'm here today to try and explain what 2 very difficult words mean. In a way, I wish somebody had explained them to me from the perspective of a white man who has raised black kids. Those 2 very difficult words are bias and prejudice. Now, I hope to explain to the sort of non-white community also why these terms are often met with such resistance by many in the white community. Hopefully, this will improve some dialogue between all the groups on these sort of divisive topics. That's my goal, is to at least pause the button from somebody who has seen both sides of this divisive issue. So the first thing I want to show you is a picture of myself, me, and I'm waiting up against a gate here for a guy to come pick up the bull he has just bought from me. This was shortly after my barn had been burnt to the ground courtesy of the neighborhood meth addict. My bull customer pulls up, sees me standing there to get his bull, and he can see over my shoulder the smoldering remains of my barn. And he asks the obvious question. He has this sort of what happened look in his eye. I could tell by looking at him. And I say, it's almost as a joke, well, at least they caught the guy. He then asked me this, which I didn't see coming. He then asked me this. Was he black? See, he had taken one look at me, and he had prejudged me to be on his side on particular issues. In that prejudgment, we call this prejudice, by the way, he took one look at me and he assumed how I would think and act and function on certain topics. You see, we can be prejudiced toward something as easily as we can be prejudiced against something. So this guy was prejudiced towards me based on how I look. Okay? So you can easily prejudge something to be good as easily as you're prejudging something to be bad. Now, we can also define the word bias. You see, this farm boy, he had a bias toward me because of how I look and the fact that we're on a farm. All of it suggested, that I would be like-minded with him. He thought he could tell that by looking at me. His words also suggested he had a bias against black people, assuming anyone who burnt down my barn would be black, and that he was going to go home with more evidence for his bias in the world. I've got other examples. I had a customer one time in corporate America, my day job. I was out to dinner with him and his wife, and he was referencing his wife's work as a teacher in the inner city. And referencing her challenges as an inner city teacher, he was white, by the way, he began to sing the lyrics for the song Welcome to the Jungle to explain where his wife worked. But in the interest of time, I'll just leave the examples at those 2. Now, neither of these people knew the 4 kids that my wife and I adopted were black. They didn't know I'd adopted 4 black kids. And I think the only reason these people verbalize these things in this way is because they've prejudged me, like I said, to be aligned with their belief systems on what they can see by looking at me. Now, this next picture is a picture of me dancing with my now adult daughter at a wedding. Now, if people saw me in this context, they'd probably prejudge me differently. In fact, they may not know what to think, especially if they saw me in both contexts. They may be wondering, whose side would I be on in these argumentative and divisive times? So now I want to delve a little deeper into the topic of systemic racial bias. And when you add that word to it, systemic, that really gets white folks all cantankerous, okay? This is one of the hot buttons among white people, often making us go off the rails. The reason is because we think when that term systemic is used, people are calling all of us racists. We think we hear something being said that actually isn't being said. See, it's not the case. It's just what we fear is being said. So, let me give you an example. Going back to the wedding picture. We adopted this now grown woman in the picture and her siblings when she was in elementary school, when all the kids were in elementary school. I was walking past her one day as she sat on the couch, about that age in elementary, and she sort of announced to me, kind of like she'd won a prize. She called me over. Rick, Rick, Rick. She said, "I'm the ugly one." Now, as those words came out of her mouth, as she described herself to me as the ugly one, I already knew why she felt that way. I knew what it was about her that made her say that about herself. I knew that her facial features and the color of her skin were culturally a mark of ugly in her world, in our world. I knew that. I hated that I knew that. I hated even more that by the time she was that age, in elementary, she also knew it. I knew it in my soul. And that is incredibly difficult to be a black woman in our world. I just didn't want to face that reality until I had that reality sitting right in front of me on my couch in 3rd grade. She continued. She said, "Now compared to my sisters," she said, "I'm the ugly one. My nose is wider, my lips are fatter, my skin is darker, my hair is kinkier. Now all the kids are black. Okay? But some of the girls have lighter skin, slender noses, thinner lips, straighter hair. They look whiter." So that's how we know something is systemic, that there's a systemic racial issue going on. And I had a very happy 3rd grader trying to prove it to me. Now, we white folks can deny all we want that this is happening, but our denial does not negate what was sitting in front of me on my living room couch that day. Now, hear me out. Systemic does not mean there's a bunch of white people surrounding my daughter, putting her down all day, or that she's surrounded by racists. Okay, that's not what systemic means, even though that's how we tend to hear an attack on us. It's how we hear things. Systemic means that it's the water in which she lives. It's the conditions of her existence. I don't know if she ever heard those exact specific words, but somehow just by observing her context, her culture, she knew it was real. I knew it was real as soon as the words came out of her mouth. Sometimes we think if we agree that there are systemic racial biases in the world, we think that if we agree to that we're agreeing the fact that we're racist. And nobody ever said that. So it's okay, for example, to agree that the water in which my child lives is cold, but it doesn't have to mean we personally dump the ice cubes into it. Okay? We don't have to feel attacked by realizing the conditions in which my daughter lived. So sometimes I can hear us white folks object to that and say, well, black people do it to each other, or other defensive mechanism, which is fine, right? All people of all colors have biases and practice prejudgment of things. It's a fact. All people, all colors. And it's not just a historic thing. That event with my daughter was 25 years ago. I don't even know. This just happened recently. I was sent a video clip from a white male coworker of a toddler, a white toddler, trying to assure her mother that all the cupcakes in the house were eaten, not by her, but by an intruder. A toddler was saying an intruder broke in, took nothing of value from the house, but according to the child, simply broke in to eat the cupcakes. The mother, who wanted to know what happened to the cupcakes, of course, was grilling her daughter while videotaping her. The mother asked her, "You mean they broke in and took nothing of value, not my purse, not the money, not our jewelry, that they just broke in and ate the cupcakes?" Now the toddler, realizing she was in a pickle, the toddler announced the final piece of evidence that her story was real. She said this, the toddler: "He was a black man." This is just something I just got the other day. The toddler blames a black man for the fact that as proof that somebody was in the house just to eat the cupcakes. So now it's horrifying enough. By the way, you can find this video on YouTube if you want to. You can just Google "toddler blames black man for stealing cakes." Just Google it. I can't put it on my own website or YouTube because it's illegal and blah blah blah. Whatever. Google it yourself. You'll find it. Anyway, it's horrifying enough that at that age, this toddler, this little white girl, just like my daughter, knows how to define what is bad. Bad is black. This toddler knows that. Okay? My daughter knew it. It's systemic. It doesn't mean that toddler is a racist. The toddler is too young to be a racist. Okay? However, what's more horrifying than the fact that this toddler knows this already is the mother's reaction. She laughs and then quickly shuts off the video. She shrieks in a funny way, not in horror, but in comedy. She somehow finds it funny, as perhaps many of us would. As a white man raising black children, I don't think it's funny. Now, it is absolutely prejudicial and biased of me to even suggest that every white man coming to buy a bull will say or think the same thing just because of how they look. Most won't say it. Some might think it. I'm not sure the percentage. I don't know. But it's prejudicial and biased of me to immediately look at a farm boy and think I know what they think based on their background and how they look. That's biased and it's prejudicial on my part. Which means, folks, I'm prejudiced. I'm biased too, which just is more evidence that we all carry this inside of us. Prejudging is what we do before we have enough information to actually judge. We do this based on our biases. We have biases towards people who look like us and act like us. We all do. I have prejudice against people that look like people who have denigrated my daughter. I am biased against them. I know coming into it that I'm going to dislike them even though I have prejudged them without that information. Now, we do all this if we are black or white, Asian, Latino, fat, thin, short, tall, it doesn't matter. Okay? It's a survival instinct. We predetermine as we approach a situation, as we approach people, humans, whatever it is, we instinctually predetermine if someone is going to be friend or foe. Is this situation friendly or harmful to us? It's a basic animalistic survival skill. Okay? It's totally normal. It's totally explainable why we do this. And at one point in our world, it probably served kind of an important function, right? To predetermine, to prejudge if we're safe here or not. Now, we white farm boys often will angrily insist that we don't do this, even though it's a basic animalistic instinct in all humans. It's like trying to argue we don't breathe. We instinctually breathe, just like we instinctually look for danger, okay? The fact that this is in us doesn't in and of itself make us bad. But when we are accused of being prejudiced or biased, which, folks, I am prejudiced and biased, we got all huffy about it because we think you're calling us bad, even though we all have bias and prejudices about everything from which truck we drive and which political party is right and wrong and how people look, young, old, thin, fat, whatever. Still, being accused of doing something bad, even though we all do it, it hurts our feelings. But we can't express it that way because we're too tough to have our feelings hurt. So it ticks us off. We get angry. That's what happens when tough farm boys get feelings hurt. We get ticked off instead. So this is why it's incredibly difficult to get some people, including people like me, to listen to a presentation on bias and prejudice, especially when it's offered to us by a black woman. Okay? That's bias. I have it. We all have it. When we get a training on racial bias, I can tell you what happens. We'll get a training on racial bias and prejudice, and a black woman will walk in, and we're going to say, oh boy, here we go. Another lecture on how we're bad. Another lecture on how we're racist. Another lecture on how we're doing everything wrong. And we put up our dukes. We get defensive about it. We say, I know where this is going. Right? We want so desperately to resist the notion that anything in us is bad. So much so that we can't actually hear what the black woman is actually going to say to us. It happens every day. So, we get all torqued off. We think that these people are, pushing their agenda on us, that they're part of the woke mob, they're our new boogeyman. And we push all these ideas that we have subconscious biases, even though we all do. We push the idea out of our mind. It's impossible. But prejudging people, folks, is real. It happens all the time. It's instinctual. It's totally normal, and it does not mean we're bad. So we got to stop first hearing those words when we start talking about systemic racial bias, prejudice, and other things. Okay? It doesn't mean our prejudices or our bias are helpful, that it's a helpful practice anymore. Okay? And I'm not here to argue whether such biases or prejudices are justified either, whether it makes sense that we're biased against black people for this reason or that reason, or that we're afraid of white police officers, or we have these prejudices. I'm not arguing whether it's justified. If I did that, I wouldn't be able to make a point. But pretending bias and prejudice don't exist is nonsense. That's my point. Okay? The problem is not, however, our conscious biases. Here's the problem. It's our unconscious biases that get us in trouble. When things operate out of our subconscious, we've got no control over them. Our aim, then, what we're trying to do here, is make sure our subconscious isn't controlling our decision making. It isn't controlling our reactions to situation. It isn't controlling how we behave when we approach somebody that may not look like us, or talk like us, or think like us, without at first talking to them and hearing them and getting what they think, hear, and feel. Now, another example here, because I too was offended by some of this talk of systemic racial bias. The Black Lives Matter movement was very, very difficult for me to think through as an example of systemic racial bias. All right? And I have black kids. But what I heard the Black Lives Matter movement saying is that I heard them insisting that I get behind the idea that black lives matter. Okay? Now, in and of itself, sure, I get that. But what I heard them saying was that I didn't matter. And that ticked me off. Meaning it hurt my feelings, folks. I just can't tell you that. It hurt my feelings to hear that maybe somebody thinks I don't matter. That we have to celebrate that black people matter. Why do we have to celebrate black people matter? But I matter too. I matter too. I matter too. So I get all angry, right? Now we can't really tell it that people that's what's really going on. That we're acting like third graders, upset somebody else is getting all the attention. But that's what's happening. Okay? And it doesn't have to happen. So with our feelings hurt, however, because we think somebody is telling us we don't matter and that we are bad and that they are good and that we are racist, we come up with a bunch of slogans of our own too, like all lives matter. I wanted to say that. I wanted to shout that from a rooftop. It's not just that black lives matter, it's all lives matter. I wanted to blue lives matter. Maybe you heard that one too. What we're really screaming is, we matter. You're not the only ones that matter. You're not the only ones that matter. We do this because we feel attacked. We feel diminished by that effort. And we feel hurt. We can't admit that, but that's what's driving it. Now, folks, I've been denied jobs and job opportunities because I'm old, and I'm white, and I'm male. I'm not diverse. That's a truth. That's a reality. And frankly, it hurts. It does hurt. I find it objectionable. However, you should know this, that what I saw happening to my daughter hurts worse. And most people don't have both experiences in their life to look back on and to reflect on. So in the midst of the Black Lives Matter, I see this picture somewhere on the internet. This young gal in this picture, this is not my daughter. However, I imagine she's got a lot of the features of my daughter, okay? And I can easily imagine that she's possibly suffered and is suffering what my daughter suffered about accusations, mental, whatever, cultural, that she's the ugly one. And because I see in her, I see my daughter, that's called empathy, by the way. Because I see my daughter in her, I am biased toward her. Okay? I trust her. I empathize with her. And the reason I do is because of the way she looks. Folks, that's a bias. I am biased toward her. See, bias is not bad, especially if we're conscious that that's what we're doing. See, through my daughter, I have seen this child's pain, a pain the average white guy may not see, may not even know exists, may not have felt in their guts the way I felt it. So, my bias toward her doesn't make it bad. It makes me human. And frankly, it allows me to hear what she's actually saying. I'm prejudging that she's going to tell me some hard stuff that I don't want to hear. And I'm right. Her sign says this: we never said only Black Lives Matter. Rick, we never said that. Rick, we know that's what you hear us saying, but we never said that. We never said that. Rick, that's your own issues, hearing us say that. But what we said was all. We know all lives. We know this, Rick. You don't have to explain that to us. We know all lives matter. But Rick, here's what we're trying to say. Look at her sign. Rick, we need your help. That's what we're trying to say. We need your help. So, here I am. Here I am, an old white bull-raising, beer-drinking, truck-driving, foul-mouthed, Jesus-loving farm boy, asking the rest of you farm boys for help. We live in a world where we are increasingly drawn to demonize people. And I know you feel demonized too. It's happening everywhere. I get it. We increasingly want to demonize people who don't think, act, or look like us. Yes, it goes both ways. But all we can control is what is happening in and through us. And folks, I'm asking for your help. Our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to realize that that tendency to dehumanize people lies in all of us. And it's simply time we see it for what it is. We call it out of the shadows, call it out of our subconscious, and into our conscious, become aware, so that we can take control over it instead of having it controlling us. All of us, not just redneck farm boys like me. Thank you. I hope this has helped. If this sort of conversation or this sort of topic is useful to you, Please subscribe to my channel where you can hear more of these issues being discussed.